All right. Welcome, welcome. Happy Monday. Allison, you're all blinged out, ready to go.
Did I scare you? Boo!
Oh my goodness.
That's the topic today. I had to do it.
Oh, that's great. I love it. Well, I mean, it is that time of year, right? I mean, that is one thing we're going to talk about today is getting our puppies ready in case you guys are participating in any festivities on the 31st, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so today's topic really is all about fear. So if you've noticed that your puppy is a little hesitant, a little scared, a little overwhelmed, they're not acting like they normally do. We're going to talk about that. It's very common. So
I just wanted to mention, Michelle, at this time of year, I know you have a teenager, I have a teenager. Sometimes they like seek out like these haunted houses, these kind of extreme ones, or they're watching these super scary movies. I think that's like, we should remind our viewers, this is a human construct, like the desire to be scared.
Yes.
In a somewhat artificial environment is not something that our dogs understand. They do not share that with us.
No.
So I do not think that there's any kind of like, oh, this will be fun that applies to canines.
Yeah. I mean, when our dogs, they don't understand what's going on. They don't have the reasoning capability that we do. And to your point, yeah, they don't seek out scary things for the thrill factor. This is not in their wheelhouse. So we're going to talk about what to do if your puppy is afraid of something, because we certainly don't want to just push them further and deeper into fear. We don't want to make it worse. We don't want to have lifelong lasting effects. So we're gonna discuss that. But before we get started, where are you guys watching from?
Where's everybody? Where are you guys?
We know we have viewers like all over the world. So where are you tuning in from today?
All right. So it would be great to hear if we have anybody from different countries. I know a lot of times people in Europe or kind of the time zones that are a little bit further ahead of us, it's like their afternoon. They can kind of check in on what's going on. We've got some people behind us in terms of time zones, maybe in Hawaii. So that's always nice to hear. But I also just wanted to remind folks, if you're just starting to kind of check us out and kind of maybe you're tuning in a little bit late, these live broadcasts are inside our channel. After we're done, you'll be able to watch it later. If this is something that you can only tune in for a couple of minutes and you got to go, it'll be in the channel. You can check it out later, or you can have somebody else watch it with you. Sometimes having a family member who hears from a professional, sometimes that's a little more helpful at getting you guys both on the same page.
Yeah, we often hear that. Michelle, can you tell my significant other what you just told me? Because I'm trying to tell them and it's not working very well. So yeah, it does carry a little bit more weight, sometimes takes the pressure off of you guys when they can hear us saying whatever it is that you need them to know. Oh, we've got some people tuning in from Ontario, Canada. We've got sunny Florida. Beautiful.
Very nice.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very nice.
All right, so let's see here. How many of you guys you feel like you've noticed something in your dogs just a little bit different, a little bit off, like you think they might be afraid of something? That is the topic for today. Yeah, for sure. That's the topic for today. So let me hop over here. Dun, dun, dun. We're talking about fear. All right, so here's the deal. Before we get started, we wanna just get the housekeeping out of the way. If you haven't joined our free Facebook group, what are you waiting for? Join us, Puppy Training with Michelle Lennon. Really, really informative group. If it's run by professionals, I think that's the most important thing. Run by professionals. All of the questions that get posted get answers to the things people need help with. And we're always sharing some of our resources too, the most valuable things that you guys could use to help train your puppies. So that's something else to keep in mind as well. All right, let's dive in. Why? Why do puppies experience this fear? Well, first and foremost, I mean, everything is brand new to them, just like a brand new baby, right? You bring home a brand new baby from the hospital, they're just leaving the womb. everything is brand new to them. The car ride home, the new house, the whole thing. So the same concept applies for our pups. When they left the breeder, when they left the rescue group, when they came to your home, it's all new to them. And these things can be scary because for many puppies, it's the first time they're experiencing these things. So we have the potential for just them being young and inexperienced. We have fear imprint periods that happen throughout their first year and maybe even beyond. We have, scary incidents, things like a broomstick falling or a loud noise that they're not familiar with. So really, everything is new to them. Allison, do you remember like one of the first things Lincoln was afraid of?
It was the ice maker. When your refrigerator's making ice and then it drops periodically, which I think to most of us, like, we don't even hear it. It is just so normal. And when he was first brought home, and he's just this tiny little guy, he would react to that. He just like, what is that? What is that? What is that noise? And he is a little bit more sound sensitive to some sounds, not all, but certainly some sounds really get him. So I think that kind of ice maker was just the beginning. And of course, now he doesn't even notice it either.
Right. Well, you've done a lot of work to help create these positive associations with these potentially scary things. So that's one of the things we encourage our viewers and our students to do, is really just kind of make a list of things that might, you might not know what it is that scares your dog, but just maybe the might scare your dog. So things like an ice maker or a vacuum cleaner or a wheelchair or walker or cane or anything kind of like that. Mm-hmm. School buses, garbage trucks, those kinds of things. You make this list, and ultimately those are the things you're going to slowly and steadily positively introduce to your dog. So anybody in the comments, anybody watching, what is something that your dog is afraid of? Let me see what you guys have.
Yeah, I would love to hear that. I think the blender is sometimes something. It's kind of loud and a bit jarring. I know, like, the whistle of the tea kettle can be alarming. And for Lincoln, it was the smoke alarm. I wished I had kind of thought of that ahead of time, because the first time he heard it was a scary incident. And so now he kind of struggles with that a little bit. And he struggles with the things that are associated with the smoke alarm, which is usually like the fan going on above the stove, because it happened that we burned some pizza once, and so that was all, related.
We're going to talk about that too, kind of that single event learning thing. Mm-hmm. We're going to add that. That's in our presentation today too. Simone says, Oakley was first afraid of the wheelbarrow. Yeah, that's totally understandable. There's this big bulky thing that maybe it moves too. You had it in one part of the yard at one point, and now it's in a totally different part of the yard. That can be kind of scary. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so let's see here. What else do we have? All right. So I'm going to have to stop this video here. I'm going to talk about what's going to go on in this video, but I want to talk about a couple of different things. What does fear look like in our dogs? So many of you guys have probably experienced you taking your dog outside, or even just putting the leash and collar on, and all of a sudden they're frozen. They're not moving. They might do what we call pancaking, where they lay completely down flat and they almost seem as if they're going, no, you can't make me. I'm not gonna. That is not what's really happening. What usually is happening is they're kind of frozen in fear. So they lay right down and they're unable to process any more information. They're unable to move. This could be just putting on the brakes out on a walk. This is not your dog going, I refuse because I want to make you mad. It's, I can't right now. So your dog is not giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time. That's kind of the concept I want you to remember when your dog is putting on the brakes or they're not moving. They could be shaking. They could be cowering. They could be going to hide under you, hide under something, right? And sometimes it looks kind of cute sometimes to us as humans, like they're trying to hide under something that is clearly not the right size for them. It's like way too small. I've seen that happen before, like a dog trying to hide under a coffee table or a chair, and they don't fit all the way. But this is a clear indicator that your pup is stressed. Something is going on in the environment that's just, they're not able to handle. They're likely not able to take treats or focus on you. And if they do take treats, that does not necessarily mean that they're okay with whatever they're experiencing. So if they're taking treats frantically, this is your dog also indicating like they're just overwhelmed. Your dog should be able to take treats calmly and nicely and relaxed. And if they aren't, that's your indicator that you have to get out of Dodge. There's something in the environment is too much for them to handle, and no learning is going on. So a lot of people think just because the dog can take the treats in a training session, the learning is happening. The dog is able to comprehend what's being taught. That is not always the case. So I just want to make sure we, spell that out too.
I think it's also so hard because we don't necessarily see what could be causing these emotions. And so it's hard for us to be like, oh yeah, okay, I'll help you through this. I remember once I was walking with Lincoln and he put on his brakes, just like you say here. And I'm like, what's up, bud? Nothing's going on. We're walking down the sidewalk. I got nothing left, nothing right. Everything's totally fine.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know. I didn't know what was going on. And so I did kind of stop and we just kind of hung out for a little bit before he was able to continue. And about 15 feet later, I noticed much further down the street, there was like construction going on. And there was one of those cement trucks, kind of with the big tube, and it was just a whole lot.
Oh, yeah.
But it was so far away that I didn't really kind of register it, but he did. And I was like, oh, and that was the direction we were headed. So he was like, why are we going that way, Mom? So it does take a moment for you to be like, okay, I gotta stop and pay attention to what he might be experiencing.
Yeah. Their body language changes, and we need to pick up on that. I always say, everybody who has a puppy, one of the very first things you guys should learn, even before a puppy comes home, but as soon as your puppy comes home, learn canine body language and how to interpret it, because oftentimes it's totally misunderstood, and humans often think the wrong thing is happening. I wanted to kind of go through this video here. We're not big on this is not a shaming video. I just want to point that out. This is us, pointing out what's happening with the dog. And it's very likely that the staff is just not familiar with either reading canine body language or maybe proper introduction of a particular tool. So I definitely, this is not a shaming. This is a trying to help you guys see some things in a dog that you might see in your own dogs. So as we play this video here, we can kind of see that the very first thing that's happening is that this cone, the Elizabethan collar, the cone of shame, you guys might call it, is being introduced. And immediately we see this dog cowering, a tail tucked, and trying to move away from the cone. So these are things that in your own dogs you might see: a cowering, a tail tuck, a trying to move away from whatever is very scary to them. So as they attempt to continue to put this collar on, we start to see some other behaviors from the dog. So again, they have this kind of rounded, hunched behavior. You're going to start to see some things from this dog's facial features as well. You can even see it just a tiny bit that there are extreme tension in the muscles in the face. It's another clear indicator. So she's attempting to try to help the dog feel a little bit comfortable about this crazy, scary thing coming at it. Now remember, this dog, he doesn't know what this thing is or why he needs to have it on. The human does, but the dog doesn't.
I think also her position, she's really kind of over the top of him, which could just really be very intimidating.
Oh, very much. We always say, if you can, at all times, be an inviter, not an invader. So I get it. They're at the vet's office. It's probably the only opportunity they're going to get to have some help to get this particular piece of equipment on. I would have loved to have gone, a different route with this. And we'll talk about what that different route is after, so that you guys too can work on this with your dogs. But we see some very big, this dog look at his eyes, like really, really big eyes. Sometimes if they're looking out of the corner, you might see what we call the whale eye. That's just like the whites of the eye showing. This dog is also very rigid. You can kind of see, yes, this dog is a muscular breed, but it's so tense that these muscles are just kind of protruding out of its body. Right? So we see a very
so tolerant.
I know, this poor pupper. He's handling it. We have what do dogs do? Flight, meaning they try to run away from it. Freeze, we have that going on. So the dog did try to move away. The dog is frozen in fear. They could fight, meaning bite. Thank goodness we don't see any of that in this video, but this dog certainly has the potential to do that. Any dog does. And we would never correct that, by the way. So as she's putting this collar on, he is just like, what is going on, right? And there's no verbal that we could use to convince this dog. There's no amount of saying, hey, this is okay, this is for your own good, is the dog going to ever understand. So we have to come up with a way to introduce this that the dog is like, yeah, I love cones. Totally put it on. Right now, the dog is like, I hate cones. Take it off. So they do, in a moment here, you're going to see they attempt to give the dog some sort of cookie. Look at how frozen that dog is. That is significant fear right there. And this is what we were talking about, inability to take treats, right? This dog is not even able to take any of the treats that it's being given. It's kind of being shoved at them, and then they start to giggle a little bit. Oh, there's a little bit of a tongue flick or a lip lick. That's another clear indicator that our pups are feeling a little overwhelmed. We often think, oh, my dog is thirsty. Let me give him some water. This is actually, in this case, overwhelmed or anxious or nervous. I try again, and he's still like, no go on the treat. So honestly, the best way that we could introduce, in this particular case, like a cone or a collar, we have a whole video for you on this. I'm going to have Caitlin share that in the comments, because we want to create a positive association. We want the dog to go, hey, let me put my head in there. And we do that by starting with it at a distance where the dog just sees it. And they make like, they're like, oh, what is this thing? They might be curious about it. They might check it out. You could put it on the floor. And every time they go near it, you might reinforce. So give them some kibble or some treats. Eventually, we're going to build up to the dog. You may be holding it and putting the treat, on the other side of it. And they're learning to put their head through. And then you're taking it off before they even start to struggle or fight to take it off. So I would say take a peek at that video as a great way to, learn how to introduce a new tool to your dog. You could take that same concept and apply it to everything, whether it's a brush or a new collar or a new harness, whatever it may be. It's broken down into steps. It's broken down and it's done at a pace that the pup is like, yeah, give me more. I love this game, as opposed to stop. I hate this. Which is all of what we saw in that video.
Dogs really are very, very resilient, and they also are not terribly complex. And so we can really use those things in our favor as long as we start slowly and introduce it in a way that's positive, which for them, again, they're not terribly complex. So most of this is treats or some kind of yummy food. And as long as we can kind of go a little bit ahead of time and advance slowly at their pace, we can 100% help them feel comfortable with whatever these tools are, whether you're introducing a new leash or collar, harness, a cone, maybe they have to wear something on their paw if they got injured. It's all very doable, and we don't need to put them through a stressful situation if we can just plan ahead just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit of planning, a little bit goes a long way. All right, let's talk about some other things that our pups might be afraid of, and when they're fearing, when they have the most fear. Ultimately, we have what's called the imprint period that happens from about birth up to about 16 weeks. Most of it happens between that 8 to 16 weeks when they first come home with you. The idea is we want to think about things, again, that they're going to be exposed to down the road, that maybe are part of your natural everyday life or lifestyle. So for example, are you guys hikers, boaters, campers? What activities do you do that you'd love to have your dog be a part of? We don't want to all of a sudden go out on one weekend and go hiking or go camping or go boating without ever introducing our dogs to any of those pieces of equipment or tools that would be part of the experience. So for example, we had one student, she was at the beginning of summer. They were planning on doing a camping trip, and it was going to be a couple weeks out. And she came to us on our pro level student call, and she was like, so I would like to figure out what the plan is. What am I going to do to introduce my dog to all this stuff so that we have a successful trip? And so it was wonderful because she had plenty of opportunity several weeks in advance to start working on desensitization of the camper, sleeping in the camper, the fire pit, the lawn chair, all the stuff that they take on their camping trip. And so she really broke it down into short, bite-sized exposure sessions, and then working on some training in that environment. So inside the camper, outside the camper, that kind of thing. Do you remember that, Allison?
Yeah, I think that was Kathy, and she did such a good job with that because, I mean, if you think about it, the puppy is going to experience new things on this camping trip. You know, we can't necessarily introduce him to the campground or other people who are there or, you know, the smells that are there. So those are all going to be new things. But if we can introduce them to some of the things that he will be around that we already have, you know, the tents and the chairs and all of that, then at least it's like, oh, these are familiar, these are no problem. And then kind of it saves his mental space for all the other new stuff, and it's not so overwhelming. And I just think that's just a kind of a kindler, gentler thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can pre-train, right? We call it pre-training, the dress rehearsal before the big show. If you kind of have that mindset of we're going to do this slow and steady and introduce it well before we need it, it's going to be like a no big deal for your pup. So if though you get to a point where your pup is already afraid of something, so you maybe you did work on it, and this is pretty common too. We have a lot of people that do work on these things, introducing these things, and then it seems as if they go through like a second fear imprint period, especially during that first year. So you exposed your pup to garbage cans, and they were great with garbage cans, and they weren't any big deal. They weren't going to eat them. And then all of a sudden, out on a walk one day, your pup is like, oh my gosh, that garbage can is now going to eat me. That is pretty common. It happens, I would say, usually closer to the 10-month mark. And it could happen after the 1 year mark as well. So it's just you're starting to notice when your pup is more afraid of something. And then that's for you to know and go, okay, we're going to have to go back a step, and we're going to have to reintroduce this thing in a positive light, in a positive way. So sometimes that fear could last a couple days to a couple weeks. So I don't want to, startle you, but I do want you to be prepared that you're not going to go out the very next day and go, look at this garbage can. See, it's not going to eat you. Isn't it great? And try to get as close to it as possible. That is actually going to make it worse. We call that trigger stacking. So if your pup is already afraid of something, and then we're adding more fear or more stress and anxiety on top of it, and then more on top of that, it's actually going to cause our pups even more distress and overwhelm. And it's going to take a lot longer for them to overcome it. Mm-hmm. So your job really is to help build the confidence, not to add to it.
Mm-hmm. I remember Lincoln, he had very specific, probably 4 of them, fear imprint periods. And we have these days of the month where we can put like big stuff out to be picked up for trash. It's called bulk trash. And, Lincoln would, see garbage cans or see like chairs or discarded things out on the street and be like, oh, no big deal. And then one day we were out on a walk and it was a big deal. All of it. I remember this rolled up carpet, and he was like, and he'd seen rolled up carpet. He has carpet here. Like it was one of these things where we're like, Lincoln, buddy, you've seen this before, but he was 100% like, and he was very, very skittish around it. So I was like, oh, I think I know what's happening here. And it really was this period. And I think his was maybe 5 days at first. And then as he got older, the imprint periods, when we did have them, they were shorter. And I really was just like, okay, I'm not going to push you into this carpet. I'm not going to scare you. I'm just going to let you decide how close to get. And I remember we stood there for probably 15 minutes as he was like,
yeah.
And I could have left. And if he decided that he really didn't want to be part of that, we would have left. But he continued to kind of investigate it. So that was kind of part of me helping him build his confidence of learning about it in a way that was comfortable for him.
I love that you gave him, you just hung out there. The leash is long enough. He can either go towards it or move away from it. And so you saw some indicators in his body language, his curiosity, where he was like, I'd like to check it out, but on my terms. I love that you just let him do that on his own instead of trying to, which most people do, and we don't want you to do this. This is why we have this whole lesson. We don't want you to just try to bring them over to it to get them over it. Flooding them with fear, not ideal. This is a dog that then could potentially not want to go near that house, near that neighborhood, down that way any longer, the more we add on to that. So This is not how we, flooding with fear is not ideal.
I remember when I first really was sure that it was in a fear imprint period when he was afraid of leaves, which he previously had been very interested in, and he liked them very much because they move and they make a little bit of noise, and they're kind of like, oh, this is a great dog toy. And then one day he was like, oh, what? what is that? And I was like, okay, that is a distinct difference between, a couple of days earlier when he was very curious about it. So that was where we really saw that fear imprint period. And again, and then it worked itself out, and we worked on building confidence and just kind of letting him take it at his pace. And then maybe 5-6 days later, it was back to, leaves, no big deal.
Yeah. A situation like that, I don't know exactly how you did it, but if you guys are experiencing something like that, where your dog was fine walking on, say, the leaves, and then all of a sudden they're not, you might start with maybe 1 or 2 leaves inside on the floor where they can explore them, check them out, or the patio, someplace where they can explore just a few of them where they're not going to make all that crinkly noise. And maybe you slowly start to add some in. You could even do something like a treat scatter in there, maybe a couple of leaves in the treat scatter. So now they're sniffing, they're rummaging through them, they're hearing it, they're touching it. And then, of course, they're finding good things. So we wouldn't want to take the whole pile or a ton of leaves and do that, because it can be, it can be overwhelming. Now we're creating a potential negative association with food when we add in the element that the only way you can get that is to touch the scary thing or go near the scary thing. We don't want to. We don't want to add that element to it.
We did that with the cone when we were introducing him to the cone before he got neutered, and we brought it home, brought it out of the package. I literally just put it on the floor, kind of in the area that he tends to play, and I did nothing. I didn't ask him to see it, touch it, nothing. I did nothing. And he was just naturally like, la, 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 huh, huh. And at some point he got a little closer and he sniffed it. And then I think like 2 or 3 days later, when it became kind of part of the environment, then we began a little bit more training to kind of get used to it or get closer to it. But at first it was really simply like, this new thing has been added to our household and it's no big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing you could do, I'm sure you did this, but if you do put something down, right? If you put it out, it's the vacuum cleaner, it's the cone, it's whatever it is, and you see your dog checking it out, reinforce that. You throw a couple of treats their way. Let them know, yeah, you checking that out, I love that. It's a positive association. That can go a long way. Mm-hmm. All right. One other thing that I want to talk about. What about fear on walks? How many of you guys have gone out for a walk and all of a sudden your dog is like, I can't go. They just stop. They lay down. They can't move. So this is pretty common, especially for our younger pups. And ultimately, this is where we say, okay, here we go. I'm going to put it out there. No neighborhood walks just yet. And everybody's going to go, oh, what? What are you talking about? Oh my gosh, I can't believe that. How am I going to get my dog their walk? Here's the deal. Neighborhoods, while they might be very comfortable for you, fine, there's nothing going on. For your dog, if you go out there and they can't move or they can't walk, or you might start to see excessive biting on the leash, these are signals that your dog is not able to handle that environment. They need a different environment for now. And they need some confidence building or even some skills building while on a leash way back at home. So ideally, we want to work on skills at home before we try to take them out into, say, a neighborhood. But we also know that you guys need to take your dogs for walks to get, enrichment into physical and mental exercise. So we would love for you to instead go on decompression walks. These are completely out of your neighborhood, maybe on a quiet trail, maybe it's a big open field, maybe it's a parking lot, empty parking lot, no cars in it, no people in it, if, say, your dog's not fully vaccinated. So getting your pup out into a place that they can just be a dog, sniff and explore, that head down, that sniffing, that can help lower their heart rate. It's on a different leash too, so a short leash, much more restricting, right? Restrictive in that they kind of have to stay super close to you at that point. With the long leash, we're talking like 20 or 30 foot. They have the ability to explore. We're putting them on a harness and it's clipped to the back. So there's some different criteria around a decompression walk versus a neighborhood walk. With a neighborhood walk, you do want your dog to kind of stay closer because we don't want them to get wrapped around a mailbox or potentially some other serious thing happens. A dog comes bolting out of a house and, they're uncomfortable. They're scared about that. So they don't have anywhere to go because the leash is shorter. So I would say we have some work to do to get them to stay close to you here at what we call go zone or close to me. before we would really ever go out on that neighborhood walk. So that's something to consider if you're needing help with leash skills. In module 1 of our 30-day to puppy perfection program, we have several actually, but in module 1 we begin the go zone or close to me games that are going to be really helpful for you to create positive associations when being at your side.
Mm-hmm. I think our favorite places for these kind of relaxing decompression walks, Lincoln has a couple with the soccer field at a park nearby, is really helpful. We go during the day when there's no games going on or anything. It's so open, which he likes, and I can let him kind of drag the leash a little bit because it's so long and it's easy for me to, watch him. And it's just, I can see, maybe way over there might be a dog coming and that could disturb him. And so I'm like, okay, we're going to head over here, but I can see everything. So we're not going to be surprised by a barky big dog coming at us. We're not going to be surprised by a bicycle or a motorcycle showing up. Big open areas for us are best, so I can avoid things that might concern him.
Yeah. You go out to your neighborhood and sometimes it's just kids playing, or to your point, like a bicycle goes by. If you haven't worked on creating that positive association with those things yet, they can be very scary for your dogs. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to have Caitlin share in the chat the decompression walk video, just so that you guys get the right information on the best way to do that, because that is what we prefer and recommend really first and foremost before you ever go for a neighborhood walk.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Oh, I like what Maxine is saying. She takes her dog on more decompression walks than neighborhood walks.
Oh, awesome.
Since one time in our neighborhood, an off-leash dog rushed him. Yeah, so a scary incident, right?
It happens more times than we think or than we hear about. I mean, a dog rushing up to you guys because it bolted out of a house happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you guys have questions about this, about your own kind of situations with walking or neighborhoods or what your dog might be experiencing with fear, you can put them in the chat here, and we're going to still work our way through this presentation, but we can take questions in a little bit. So feel free to post some questions and we'll go over them with you.
Yeah. All right. So how do we build confidence? Well, ultimately, as you've heard us say, this is when we're working on something that your dog is afraid of, we're not going to push too far too fast. Oftentimes, training sessions are very short and sweet at about 1 to 2 minutes. And they're when our dogs are way back behind what we call the threshold. So it's kind of this imaginary distance from whatever the trigger is. Or it could be the volume of something is really low that our dogs just barely hear it. And that could be the threshold. It's be low enough that the dog is not, barking their head off because they hear it at the regular level. So a good example would be thunder. So we would want to, get out our phone or get out our laptop, computer of some sort, and control the volume of the sound. So we would go to maybe YouTube here and we would type in thunderstorms. We would start with the volume very low, barely audible. And when we play it, they're going to be given tasty treats. Then we're going to stop it. And the treats stop and the sound is already stopped. And we can start it back up again. This is great for you guys to be able to control when it happens and then what happens. You giving the treats to your dog. So we can start to make that one-to-one positive association. And over time, you start to gradually increase the volume. That doesn't happen. Volume increasing does not happen on day one. So I just want you to, want to point that out. This could be days, it could be weeks, or it could be months, depending on how fearful your dog really is. Other things could be garbage trucks or school buses, those things that have those really loud air brakes. You could play those type of videos on YouTube as well. City sounds, sounds of just honking horns, the traffic, those kinds of things. We can really start to teach our dogs to think about things in a whole different way when we create these positive associations with them in a more controllable setting. At home, we control the volume, we control when it starts. And slowly, you're going to fold in what we call the show, the real deal, actually physically going out into these environments. But it doesn't happen right away. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. I remember working on this with Lincoln. He definitely has some lower confidence levels around other dogs, but at a distance, he's definitely fine. There's a certain distance at which he's fine, and this is kind of that threshold concept. But then as we get closer, there's a certain line at which it's too close. So we were at the park one day, and there was some dogs way over there, and I remember the owner was working with the dog on like this frisbee catching, and Lincoln was very interested, and we were watching. And so I kind of stopped right there because he was interested. He was curious. But if I had gone any further, that curiosity would have turned to discomfort, maybe agitation, stress, fear, kind of the range of emotions. And so we had a great time, Lincoln and I. We just watched, and he was very comfortable, and I would give him some treats as he would watch. And then, I would watch, and then every once in a while he would look up at me. It was an extremely relaxed, comfortable training session. It lasted about a minute, 2 minutes tops, and then we left.
Yeah.
No need to push it. No need to be like, let's go meet this dog.
Yeah. That sounds kind of like the engage, disengage we've been working on with our students, again, over at pro level, where they're starting to identify when their dog sees something that they are afraid of. They're already way back at that distance. The dog is checking it out. And then when they disengage, they're looking up at their owner and getting the reinforcement for that.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's such a fascinating concept. And yet I do just want to say it is highly individualized. It is somewhat, it sounds easy as we say it. And so you might be like, okay, I understand this, and I'm going to work on this with my dog. And you go out and you're like, it's not quite working, because it really is harder. So this is the kind of thing where if you need some help with it, or you want to kind of get some fine tuning, we can help you with this, because it doesn't come naturally to humans to think in this way. So sometimes you do have to consult a professional to kind of get it a little bit better to work for you.
Yeah, it's definitely not cookie cutter. It's for sure not a cookie cutter. There's not like one thing you can do, because to your point, every dog is going to feel a little bit differently. Every threshold is going to be different. So say you're working on garbage trucks in your neighborhood. Well, guess what? Garbage trucks in a completely different neighborhood is a whole different thing. Dogs don't generalize. So it's something that, sometimes we just have to work on this individually with each person, and then and go from there. Like maybe we say, okay, you got to hang out at back at the sound desensitization before we even go outside in the front yard, type of thing, for one dog. But another dog, they're already ready to go out in the front yard and listen to a real garbage truck. There are several videos that we do have here on our channel to kind of help work on building confidence. Whether it's actually building confidence in, stepping on things or walking on things or hearing things, I would say these videos here will kind of paint some pictures of what to look for in either panic or what to look for in fearfulness. And then also this, like, for example, the games to play with your dog. This is really helping them kind of use their brain to figure out what they should do next. I think that's a good way to say it. Wouldn't you, Allison?
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of problem solving, critical thinking. I kind of think of that. I do a lot of that with Lincoln. When I feed him his dinner, he has to kind of do some problem solving. And yesterday he was working on getting kind of this chew toy out of, those soft logs that you get toys, dog toys, and you get to put stuff in them. Well, I put sometimes this chew toy in them, and it's just slightly the same size as the hole. And he's just like, I know it's in there and I don't know how to get it out. And he worked at it for a while. My daughter Haley and I were both watching him, and he got it. And I was like, good boy. He worked at that for a while. But, the other thing I wanted to mention with this that we really haven't talked about, it takes a while to build up your confidence as a dog trainer, because that is not necessarily a role that we know, or that doesn't come naturally. Michelle, you studied for a long time and had a lot of experience to kind of build on, but we're not experts when we start kind of working with our dogs. So all of the different training games that you do, and like those games that you just mentioned, the DIY obstacle course video that we have, those all build your confidence as a dog owner to get to know your dog and to be like, okay, I see what we're doing here. So there's an element of confidence in the human as well.
I love that. You're right. You're together. You guys are not only building a bond, but you're building up your confidence in the skills and being able to recognize when your dog is feeling a certain way. So it does take time. I definitely don't want to paint this picture as like you're going to go start tomorrow and all of a sudden both you guys are going to be experts or something. It took us years to get to this place as well. And not that it's going to take you years, but you're working on things individually with your dog, whereas we have to know a variety of different dogs, scenarios, situations, approaches to being able to work through those. So I wanted
you will get to know your dog really, really well, which then allows you to be kind of their best advocate, and it allows you to make really good choices with them, for them, when you combine it with that kind of canine science and education that you're getting in a video like this.
Yeah. This question here, Anders, our staffy is quite sensitive to certain sounds. Drills are probably the worst, and sometimes he doesn't even want to walk around the block if there's been a scary incident on a previous walk. Yes, yeah. So situations like this is where whenever our dog has had an experience that they don't love, we want to give them time to decompress afterwards. So that means that for the next day to a week, we don't want to go back out and then try to go for that walk again. We want to give them the opportunity to go through without any stress being added on, so that we're not doing what we call that trigger stacking. So giving them time to just, it's like us. When we go through something traumatic, ideally, we shouldn't just rush back into facing that problem again. Otherwise, it's going to cause problems down the road. We call it trigger stacking. So for your staffy, what I would recommend is just identifying what those potential scary triggers are for sounds, such as drills, and see if there's a way that you could make a control where you're controlling the sound, creating a positive association. And the concept is we're changing his response. So right now the response is, ah! We want the response to be, what is that? Doesn't necessarily mean he needs to love it, but it does mean that he needs to go, okay, I recognize that thing, but I know good things are going to happen. That's the concept. As a matter of fact, let me share this slide. That's the next slide. So we call it counter conditioning at that point. When the dog has already created a association with something, there's fear already present. Now we have to change their response, change their mindset about it, change the association from negative to positive. So we do want to make sure we take that break to avoid that trigger stacking. And we're going to work on counter conditioning. We're going to work on teaching them that when they hear the thing at maybe a low level or at a very far distance, they're going to get positive association for that. Does that sound doable for you, Anders? I think it sometimes is a little tricky of a concept. It's a little bit harder. But when we go slow, when we put a plan together, we physically write some stuff out, write what the fear is, we always say, write down what you'd like the finished product to be, and then work backwards. Like write down, okay, if I broke that down in half, what would that look like? If I broke that half down into another half, what would that look like? And so our goal is to kind of get to the smallest training session possible with the least scary thing happening and start there. So, it sounds like Lincoln's still barking.
I think we're almost done. I was telling Michelle at the beginning of this call, we have a mobile oil change happening in our driveway. I didn't know it was happening, and it just happened right at this hour, and Lincoln is unimpressed. This is new for him, and he doesn't have a ton of confidence, but when it's kind of like outside, it's a bunch of new noises, he's really uncertain about it. If I weren't on this call, I could be working with him to be like, let's focus, let me get your attention. But because I'm on the call, he's kind of a little uncertain about it. But I think we're all good. I think that everything has left the building.
I think it's like the perfect timing, to kind of, all right, we're dealing with fear here. Lincoln has a little bit of fear of the oil change guy. I think he's always, whenever he hears people outside that he can't see, that's something that can really set him off.
Yeah, it's really, he'll hear noises or cars or whatever, but when he hears the voices, he's like, I don't understand. Where are these people? I can't see them. And so when I'm here, And I definitely can work with him, and he can really like, okay, I'm good. He kind of takes direction from me. We'll be further back in the house so we can still hear things. But again, that threshold, but it's just a little harder to manage today. But I think we're all good, and he's gonna take a nap after this, which is probably best for him. He's about due for one. I see Pickles behind you sleeping.
Yeah, already napping, like zonked right out, sprawled and zonked. All right. To be honest, this is technically the end of the presentation. We really just have, if anybody has any questions, Q&A session related to fear, we're definitely happy to take them for you.
Let's take this one. Snowing just mentioned mine is afraid of any barking from other dogs.
Yeah, that can definitely be kind of scary. It's like other dogs are potentially overstimulated and excited or fearful themselves. So your dog's kind of not sure how to handle that. Have you done any of where we kind of identify what the distance away is, where your dog is still calm and relaxed and still can focus up on you? But if you were to go 2 feet further, they would just totally, your dog you would see signs of fear, hiding, tongue flicks, ears pinned, tail tucked, that kind of thing. I would say identifying what the threshold is kind of number one. And number two is really starting to put together that counter conditioning plan so that we can create this positive association with dogs barking. And I will be honest, this is going to be hard. I don't want to sugarcoat it. And the reason it's going to be hard is because sometimes dogs barking is unpredictable. You just don't know when a dog's all of a sudden you're going to kind of come out of nowhere and start barking. Well, we can definitely do some things. We can teach our dogs some coping behaviors or techniques to be able to handle that. So, for example, one of the things I know you've done, Ellison, with Lincoln is you started that distance work. You started working on when you saw dogs that you knew in your neighborhood were the barky ones. You started working back behind that threshold, started working on focus or blocking or even treat scatters. That's one thing where if we can get our dog's head down and we can do a treat scatter on the ground as that other dog is passing by, that can be very helpful for our dogs. But we do want to start to set up like counter conditioning sessions where you're controlling the barking in some fashion. So that would be the YouTube videos where it's on low, the barking is just barely audible. When you push play and the barking happens, you're giving the treats. And then you're slowly increasing the barking level or sound level over time. Now, we do have 2 totally different things happening, right? We have just sound, but then when you experience the real deal, you have a real dog. There's actually behaviors from that other dog that could be sending your dog serious stress signals. So I would also then identify where do you see all these dogs that maybe are causing this? And is it possible that we can avoid that area for a while? I would definitely recommend that because that is part of giving the dog that decompression time in between seeing that trigger, right? We don't want to just then go out the next day if they've already had fear, because what's going to eventually happen is your dog is going to start to get to a point of extreme discomfort and extreme fear, and reactivity is going to kick in, where they're going to potentially start to excessively bark or fearful bark, really, or start lunging at the end of the leash. And that doesn't mean they want to go say hi. So I would not want your dog to get to that point. So we have to kind of put some plans in place here to work through that.
I think barking is also hard because there's so many different types of barking, and your dog knows better than we do what that kind of barking might be communicating. So there's the, hey, how's it going? I'm kind of curious, or hey, mom. And then there's the, I'm really, really uncomfortable kind of bark. And I definitely see Lincoln reacts differently to different barks. And so that's kind of part of the counter conditioning that we have to do to kind of understand which barking, is causing a reaction. Yeah. I also just wanted to mention that, for those dogs who maybe aren't as confident, I have one of those, there's lots of ways to build their confidence that doesn't involve kind of over stressing them in environments. Lincoln, I really encourage curiosity. And part of that is anything I bring into the house, groceries, a package, even if it's not for him, I let him check it out, because that in itself is new and different, and it builds his curiosity and his exposure to new things in an environment that's comfortable for him. So if my daughter comes home from work, she sits down, he sniffs everything. What happened today? What was your work like? So I like to do that in a way that is comfortable for him.
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, did you see Maxine's question at the very end there?
Yeah, let's look at that one next. So she said there was a sudden dog attack on their little Maltipoo. He doesn't know how to meet other dogs. He gets jumpy and overcautious. From afar, he wants to bark and lunge at them. Wanting to know, is this fear?
Yeah, this definitely sounds like, without knowing more details, it certainly sounds like, well, this to me is kind of a single event learning. We had a very scary situation happen, right, where a very small dog was attacked. And that could be really traumatic, going forward when they see other dogs, because they have that association. So what I always recommend is, I actually very, very, very rarely, if at all, allow the dogs to meet. As a matter of fact, when we're out on a walk, we were just on a walk yesterday. At no time do I allow my dogs to meet other dogs while on a leash, right? So that's kind of rule number one. And the reason being is there's a leash attached to them. It causes frustration. If they go to meet and one is friendly and one is not, somebody's going to give a signal that they're uncomfortable. It could get misinterpreted. And also, there's an easy potential for a fight to happen. We don't ever want dogs face-to-face meeting. We actually do what we call parallel walks, where the dogs are walking on opposite sides of the street and they can kind of glance over, check each other out. They can definitely smell each other. And from there, we determine, based on their body language, based on their comfort level at a distance away from each other, like again, other side of the street, how would these dogs do if we got a little bit closer? How would they do if we got a little bit closer? And then when we decide that they are comfortable, we then use, say, like a fenced in area and let them engage that way, never on leash. The other thing that happens too is natural instinct for humans is to apply some pressure to kind of keep them apart, but yet let them get together, but keep them apart. They feel that, and that opposition reflex, they're wanting to pull forward towards the other dog. That could actually cause more frustration. And then when they finally do meet, they take it out on each other. So in a situation like this, though, when we have a dog that's already has some fear because of an attack, we don't want to go in with the mindset of, okay, I need to get them over this so that we can start meeting up with other dogs again. I'm going to have you put that whole idea of meeting up with other dogs on a back burner for a while. It may or may not happen. But in the meantime, we're going to start working on just seeing dogs from a distance and creating a positive association. That's it. A distance far enough away, remember that threshold, that magic line that we want to stay back behind, because if we go over it, that's when our dogs start showing fear or anxiety. So we're going to just start working on that for quite some time. And what is quite some time? It could be weeks, months, or even years in this case. So don't go in with the mindset of we're gonna work to get our dog interacting with other dogs. At this point, we're just going to take that right off the table.
I think it's so easy for humans to always have that goal in mind, but the process of the training is very valuable. It's a great relationship builder where you're working together with your dog. Your dog is being exposed to new things. They're kind of thinking about it. They're learning. So even though you're like, but we're not meeting other dogs, that's okay. The training session just by itself is great mental work for them. And it will, provide that benefit of helping them settle well when it's time for a nap or the night. So just remember, the process in itself is valuable.
Yeah. It's very common for us to think that socialization is the interaction and exposure to other dogs, and that they should be interacting and playing together. Not all dogs like other dogs, and that's okay. And a lot of people are like, but I want my dog to like all dogs. And I always say, do you like all people that you meet in your life? Have you wanted to be BFFs with everybody that you've met? And the answer is most likely no. Very, very few people want to be friends with everybody. Friendly, not necessarily BFFs though. And that's okay. That there's no reason that your dog has to be friends with every dog. Just it's not necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lincoln really, really enjoys my kids' friends. Like the kids come over, he really likes to get to know them, especially if he's met them before. And you know what? I'm like, if these are the kind of things, people, species that you want to hang out with,
yeah,
I'm okay with that. He absolutely loves humans, not every human, but a lot of humans. Really hasn't really met dogs that he loves. He's met a few, but frankly, he just really loves humans.
Yeah, and that's cool. I love that you recognize that in him. And he doesn't, you know, like we said, he doesn't need to be friends with all the neighborhood dogs and dogs at the dog park and, you know, all that. You've recognized where he gets his enrichment from, and that's engagement with other humans.
Yeah. And, you know, we still are able to pass dogs on the street, depending on what that other dog is up to. You know, if that dog is like, nothing interesting here, Lincoln's like, yeah, okay. But if that dog is kind of, you know, lungy and barky, then Lincoln will get a little bit more agitated. So knowing that is very helpful. So it's not like he's like, I hate all dogs, but he's like, nah, we're good. I'll hang out with my humans.
Love it.
Oh, Maxine sounds like she's got a similar situation. Yoshi is like that with my kids' friends. This is such a valuable thing for our dogs. They love this. They're meeting things, doesn't matter whether it's a dog or human, they're meeting other living beings that they are enjoying. This is enjoyment. It doesn't matter if it's not another dog.
Yeah.
Some dogs like cats.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, absolutely. All right. You guys had great questions. If there were any more that came through that we missed, I'm so sorry, but please don't hesitate to join our Facebook group, Puppy Training with Michelle Lennon. We can help you guys over there with any additional questions that you have about fear or any of the other puppy training topics that pop up from time to time. We go live every Monday, whether it's here on YouTube or over in that group. So we encourage you to join us for next week's lesson. Which I don't even know what it is, Allison. What is
next? Like we haven't done biting in a while.
Oh, okay. All right. We can do biting.
We worked on crate training. We did potty training. We've done fear. I know that that's one that a lot of people struggle with. So maybe we need to put that back in rotation soon.
Awesome. All right. And of course, we have our whole YouTube channel, over 150 videos, of a variety of different topics. Ranging from crate training to potty training and unwanted behaviors and how to work through them. And then, of course, we do have our online puppy training program, 30 Days to Puppy Perfection, that if you're looking for more information on kind of the best way to go through training, a step-by-step approach, and then also working through some unwanted behaviors, we have that available as well. And I think Caitlin has shared a couple of those links to our other videos, and then, of course, the course in the comments for you guys. All right. Well, I hope you have a blessed rest of your day. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week and happy training. We'll see you guys on the next call.
Bye, everyone.